Whilst trying to recover from that virus that we're not allowed to talk about on YouTube, I was cooped up inside for several days, perusing eBay listings for a few vintage Star Wars items that I'd like to add to my collection, when something stopped me dead in my tracks.
That's no moon. It's a space station.
I came across some listings for various Stan Solo custom figures that were selling for hundreds of dollars. At first I thought this just couldn't be real, and that my fever had caused me to start hallucinating. But after messaging a few close friends and sharing some screenshots, I began to realise that this was real. Very, very real. How could these custom Star Wars figures, as impressive as they are, have skyrocketed by up to 400% in value? I remember not all that long ago when the anti-repro Star Wars community were mocking these figures, calling them bootlegs and saying that they had no place in the hobby, and now many Stan Solo figures are worth considerably more than genuine vintage Kenner Star Wars figures.
It's not true! That's impossible!
How exactly did this happen?
Come with me, toy fans.
I have been a huge fan of Stan Solo's custom Star Wars figures from the very beginning, and I have made multiple videos showcasing their amazing products. But for those of you who are not familiar, let me give you some context. Chris Smith is the man behind Stan Solo Creations and the designer of all their incredible products, which include several high-quality reproduction Star Wars figures and almost countless custom Star Wars figure offerings. A number of years ago, Chris owned a different company called Smith Lord Creations, and he started out by making reproduction Star Wars accessories, much to the dismay of the hardcore Star Wars toy collecting community, who went to insane lengths to try and get him shut down.
The Empire may be gracious enough.
Thank you.
The behaviour of these anti-repro goons reached disgusting heights, yet that is not the story that we are here to tell today. If you do want to learn about these nutjob fans and their almost biblical crusade to rid the world of reproduction Star Wars toys, then I highly recommend watching the retroblasting video, Repro Cops. After selling reproduction Star Wars accessories for a period of time, Smith Lord Creations decided to up their ante and come out with their first ever custom Star Wars figure, Han Solo in Stormtrooper disguise. This was a terrific choice of character because both Luke Skywalker and Han Solo wear Stormtrooper disguises when infiltrating the Death Star in the first Star Wars film. Yet Kenner only ever produced the Luke version as an action figure back in 1984.
Luke, we're gonna have company!
This custom figure filled a hole in the original Kenner Star Wars lineup, and when it first hit the market, I was absolutely blown away by the quality. This figure didn't just look like it had been designed by Kenner, it felt like it too, which is something that not even Hasbro's been able to achieve with their attempts at a Star Wars retro collection series. The plastic used in the production of this Smith Lord Creations figure is an exact match for what Kenner used back in the day, and articulating this figure's joints gave me the feeling of playing with a new Kenner Star Wars figure for the first time in over 35 years.
A long time.
The Han Solo in Stormtrooper disguise action figure was a big success for this small independent toy maker, but its existence spurred on even more lunatic behaviour from the toy collecting radicals.
Liar!
This situation was further compounded when Smith Lord Creations produced extremely accurate reproductions of two of the rarest Star Wars figures in existence, Yak Face and Blue Snaggletooth. No longer wanting to deal with the online threats and abuse from the Star Wars zealots, Chris Smith decided to sell the company he had founded to his American distributor, the Fans Strike Back.
Jabba, a pave trip. You're throwing away a fortune here. Don't be a fool!
At the time the company was sold, many fans were already aware of Chris's plans to produce a Bantha toy, based on a prototype image that had been circling on the internet, and when Smith Lord was sold to the Fans Strike Back, the new owner informed everyone that they would pick up where Chris left off and continue on with the development of the Bantha toy. Around the same time, the Fans Strike Back also announced a set of 13 unreleased Star Wars figures, which at the time were supposed to be released in just a few months. This sent alarm bells ringing in Chris Smith's head, because he understood the complexities and time frame involved in getting just one action figure produced, let alone 13 different figures, and he knew that the Fans Strike Back were making promises they couldn't keep.
What do you think of him?
I couldn't run a tap.
He couldn't run a tap.
Over the following months, Chris's frustration grew stronger as he saw people buying into Smith Lord's reputation, knowing full well that the Fans Strike Back were taking customers' money hand over fist for products that they could not deliver. I'm assuming that Chris felt somewhat guilty about this situation, so after some soul searching he set up a new company called Stan Solo Creations, and he returned to what he does best, making top quality Kenner-styled Star Wars action figures.
I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
Over the next couple of years we sadly learned that the Fan Strike Back would fail to deliver on their promised Bantha toy and their set of 13 unreleased Star Wars figures, and they have robbed customers of hundreds of thousands of dollars while still having these items listed on their website, even if they are listed as sold out.
Mind trick's gonna work on me. Only money.
Another immense cause of customer frustration during that period of time was that instead of focusing on delivering the products that people had paid for, the Fan Strike Back was more concerned with running Chris Smith's reputation into the ground and trying to persuade people to boycott Stan Solo products. Whether it was with Smithlord Creations or with Stan Solo, Chris Smith has always delivered the quality products he has promised, and I personally believe that the Fan Strike Back were trying to get Stan Solo shut down because every time Chris delivered a new figure, it shined a spotlight on their own ineptitude and their almost criminal behaviour. I know it took me a long time to get from my ass to my elbow, but now we finally return to one of the reasons why so many Stan Solo custom Star Wars figures have skyrocketed in price. Before the Fan Strike Back's reputation was blown to smithereens, and while they were still on their full-blown Chris Smith witch hunt, the Fan Strike Back was somehow able to get Stan Solo's factory in China shut down. While Chris Smith and Stan Solo have been able to recover from this, and they now use an entirely different factory to manufacture their action figures, this underhanded tactic resulted in Stan Solo losing many of their production tools, meaning that they are no longer able to produce some of their best loved figures.
It's not fair.
In particular, some of Stan Solo's astromech droids and their Imperial Technician now sell for over $500 US. Not bad for a toy line that several so-called Star Wars experts said had no place in the hobby. While I'm certain that low production numbers of Stan Solo figures and the subsequent scarcity has played a part here, it is also proof positive of just how good these products are. This isn't an isolated case. I'm not looking at one single eBay listing here and padding out the results. There are hundreds of examples of Stan Solo action figures being sold on eBay for well above the retail price that was being asked just a few years ago, which leads me to one irrefutable truth. Stan Solo's products are demanding these aftermarket prices because they are hands down the best Kenner-style Star Wars action figures available on the market today. A custom Stan Solo Imperial Technician that was only recently produced is now selling for the same price as a rare vintage Star Wars figure from 1985. And that is just crazy. It also makes me laugh at all the commenters who have posted on my YouTube channel over the years, saying that Stan Solo's retail prices are too high. These people fail to understand how the cost of manufacturing is established. A large corporation like Hasbro, that produces action figures in the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, can afford to manufacture figures at a much lower cost because of their high order quantity. Whereas a small company like Stan Solo, that is possibly only making 1,000 or 2,000 of each figure, incurs a much higher cost per unit. Either way, they must be kicking themselves now for turning their nose up at the £25 price tag of that Imperial Technician. Stan Solo protocol droids are also in demand, with carded examples proving to be very popular and pricey. This also reinforces my belief that if you make a quality product that people love, the demand for it will always exceed the demand for inferior items that are easier to obtain. I've lost count of the amount of times people have responded to my gripes about lackluster toy lines, such as the Star Wars Retro Collection and G.I. Joe Classifieds, with comments such as, "Just be grateful they're still making them," and "If we don't support these figures, they won't make any more." Well, I've got news for you. Those new retro indie figures you just bought are not worth the price of admission. And you know why? Because they're cheap garbage.
What a piece of junk!
Do you remember the Midnight Madness back in 1999 when tens of thousands of Star Wars fans across the US queued up to buy Phantom Menace figures? That was 24 years ago, and you can't give those figures away now. And before you say anything, I know it's not all about value. I've said many times before on this channel that I wish vintage toys were practically worthless, so I could afford to buy many more of them, because my enjoyment of these toys is not driven by what monetary gain they could bring me one day. My point is that if those Phantom Menace figures were good, and if the movie that inspired them was good, and if they weren't overproduced to the point of retail suffocation, then the demand for them would still be there. But it isn't. In the present day, the big players in the industry continue to phone in their design efforts, while increasing prices and cocking up distribution. And in the case of Hasbro, they're even harassing their fans by sending Pinkertons to their front door.
But I want them alive. No disintegrations.
If Hasbro's Star Wars Retro Collection figures were actually any good, you wouldn't find them listed on eBay for peanuts. And yet so many of my fellow collectors continue to be willingly brainwashed by brand loyalty to corporations that do not care about them. And they would rather buy a lackluster product with a Hasbro logo on it than support independent toy makers who actually give a shit about delivering items that fans really want. As my good friend Michael French always says, the fans are doing the best work, and it seems that some people are finally starting to wake up to that fact. I wish more of you would. I'm not telling anyone to stop buying Hasbro products, but you should open your minds to the possibility that Hasbro is not the be-all and end-all when it comes to action figures. There are some truly wonderful independent toy makers out there who deserve your business, and they've been under your nose the entire time.